You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show. Now that that's squared away, let's start the show. Hey there, it's time for the show, The Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Tatiana Show. I'm really happy to have you joining us today. I've got Josh Shigala with me. Hey, Josh.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well.
Great episode.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Josh is here from Voltoro Broadcasting. I am taking a break from recording new episodes for Proof of Love. And I'm doing this Tatiana Show because we have a very intense topic coming up where Kirk Phillips from the BitcoinCPA.com is going to be talking to us about what do you do when you're getting SIM card attacked? You know, how do you protect your cryptos? How do you protect your stuff? But before we get into that, I wanted to make sure that I gave people a heads up. We've got a new sponsor on the show. It's Salt Lending. They're pioneering ways for you to grow your business using your crypto holdings. So it's a lending platform. saltlending.com/Tatiana. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about it later in the show. But in the meantime, if you're interested in seeing who's supporting the show, Salt has been kind enough to do so. Another supporter of the show has been Kirk Phillips. He's been helping me do my taxes, but he has recently been the victim of, I guess, a SIM hacking thing. Why don't you say hello, Kirk, and fill us in a little bit on what's been going on?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I wanted to just share about my incident, and I thought it would be valuable for the community to provide the ways to go about increasing your security and stepping up your digital identity game.
Super important topic, everyone. You know, I've had a few people that I've known that have used SMS for two-factor and been a victim of this attack. And so it's really good to talk about it on this show.
Yeah, just as a reminder, so some of the stories from the past are Jared Kenna, one of the founders from Trade Hill, going back to around late 2016, I believe. That was one of the big stories that I remember, maybe the first one I remember. And of course, he was a victim of a SIM card swapping attack, and they really swooped in and really dismantled everything under his control within a matter of minutes. And of course, being an early Bitcoiner, he lost an untold amount of Bitcoins, and it's just heartbreaking to think about what that must feel like. So, you know, there's that story. Of course, the most recent story is Michael Turpin's, you know, incident with AT&T. He had the same thing happen. I believe in that case, there was a Coinbase is the issue there where the crypto was stolen from. So there's, and, you know, the stories go on and on and on here. So, yeah, as we know, the phone carriers are notorious for bad security practices, and they, you know, so relying on a phone number as your identity is just not something to do. So there's, you know, people are still using this, even, you know, so basically if the platform supplies that as the two-factor method, you know, then the users will sign up and say, okay, well, that's what's being presented to me. I guess I'll use it. It must be safe, like that kind of thing. So that really should be the you know, factor of last resort when possible.
Let's just take this back a second for those that don't know. Basically, websites, when you have a two-factor, what it means is that you log into a website and it's not only your username and password, but it also asks for your phone number. So when you log in, it sends you an SMS with a special code that only lasts for like 30 seconds or a minute or 30 minutes. And you enter that number or a bunch of numbers and letters and hit enter, and it'll let you in. And this is usually a very secure thing to do, is have some sort of two-factor authentication. And what is a lot better to use than SMS is actually authenticating protocol based on what the open source mechanism that Google provided. But yeah, the SMS one is extremely, extremely scary because of what Kirk will walk us through.
Yeah, so what happens is in these cases is that somebody's phone number, their mobile phone and their email are basically known, especially when the party is in the crypto space, and they're well known. So their email and their phone number is spread around, right? Everybody knows what it is. So the more you are out there in the public eye, and the more you just have one email and one phone number, the more likely people are to know what that is. And basically you've already given them the keys to the top lock, so to speak, to start the attack. So the way it's typically worked is through social engineering, where you can just do a Google search, see what the carrier is for a particular phone number that you already know, because again, it's just floating around out there. So the attacker calls the phone carrier, makes an impersonation as if they were that person, gains access to the phone number, and basically it's like reassigning the phone number from the person's phone to the hacker's phone. And then once they do that, then they already know what your emails are, like I said in that example. So they can just proceed to dismantle all your emails one by one, type the email in, go through the recovery process, get the code you get access to reset the password to the email because the code comes into the phone that the hacker now has control of, and so on. And then just go down the line and just take over everything, and then you lose complete control. So that's what's happened in many cases. Although I think there's some other attacks that are beyond even the social engineering, which is a little bit more scary. So yes, anyway, so what happened to me was on January the 18th, which was a Friday, I was actually out later the night before, winding up some business affairs from a business I had been in for about 14 years, and it was a bit of a hostile unwinding of the business and so forth. So it was, we were two out of the three of us that were on the same page. We were quite happy that was over with. So I'd been out, and I was kind of out late that night, and since it took so much work to get through that process, I wasn't really even looking to have a lot on my schedule on that Friday. So anyway, I woke up. I remember I glanced at my phone, and I thought, it looks like the signal's not there. But I thought, well, sometimes you turn your radio off, airplane mode, that kind of thing. And then I was actually going to go do a research trip. I was on my way I was going to go look for commercial safes, actually, speaking of security. So there's not that many of those types of places around. So I found a couple. I plugged the address in my phone, hopped in the car, went to hit GPS so I could guide myself there. And of course, I was like, I was like, you know what? I've been SIM card hacked. I know that's what it is. So I just turned around because there was no signal, and of course, GPS didn't come up. So I turned around, called AT&T. Sure enough, somebody from the day before had gone about swapping the card, making the swap, and they did it by supposedly calling into the customer service and getting past the authentication pin, which to me, I'm skeptical about that. Again, no notorious practices, but they claim that the customer service claims they have to type the pin in to get past, to be able to do anything with the account. So now I had a 4-digit pin at that time. Now there's an 8-digit pin. I don't know if 8 was even available when I first set it up. But even in a 4-digit pin, that's a 1 in 10,000 chance of guessing it, which is pretty hard to do, right? So
yeah, and I just want to say that actually, what the major thing here is humans. Humans are the big vulnerability here, because you basically get through to these minimal. I'm not saying that minimum wage workers. There's anything wrong with that, but there's just a whole lot of support people. So what these hackers will do is ring AT&T or whoever, Verizon, make a phone call and say, "Hey, yeah, I'm pregnant and I've lost my phone and I need a new SIM card." And the person on the line says, "Oh, have you got the 4-digit PIN?" And they'll say, "Oh no, but could you just let me through?" And they'll usually say no, and then they just hang up and ring again and try it again. And they'll do it over and over again, because you're always going to get a different person until you get the one person who feels so sorry for you that they go, "Well, that's good enough." Plus, the internet, you tend to leak so much data on the internet that it's quite easy to research something that makes it look like you. And so it's about just constantly retrying and retrying and retrying. And eventually someone will really release that pin. And then you get to the point where they just reset the pin, they make their own pin, then they go and do an email reset, they'll get into your email, and it's just downhill from there.
That's right. Add in the crying baby in the background, make it chaotic in the background, that adds to the potential success of you getting through to that person. These people, they're working all day, they're tired. At some point, not only would they potentially feel sorry or just, kind of circumvent the rules, but, they may get tired and actually just forget and make a mistake. I'm sure after you talk to, dozens or 100 people throughout the day, you probably make a mistake somewhere. So, but also just to note here, this is this is an area where I knew there needed to be a step up in improvement, because I was heading towards basically getting another phone line that was be completely used only for 2FA purposes and so forth. So that was already on the roadmap. I just hadn't gotten to it yet. So actually this whole thing has really been a gift, not only to me, but being able to share this now with other people and so forth, today and in the future.
Is there any kind of insurance that people have for this stuff? Can you buy insurance in order, what happens if something like this goes wrong and, I don't know, you didn't prepare, can you prepare for it in another way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if there's specific insurance for this type of attack. It may be that you have some other type of coverage. I can't think of what that would be, but you may have something else where this may fall under that. So yeah, that would be obviously a good thing to have, in this area, because even there's always risk, even when you have best practices. Even if you have an A+, that's your grade for your security. There's still risk, there's still weaknesses hanging out that have nothing to do with you. It has to do with other people because they're part of the equation. So I didn't notice any penetration on 118, on January the 18th. So then, got the control of my number back. And then on about a week later, on Saturday the 26th, January 26th, about 9:15 in the evening, I actually just happened to check email. I actually hadn't checked it for about 5 hours, and I noticed that there was a password change. So basically somebody had done it again, and they had taken over control and done another SIM card attack, and
wow,
took control of the number. I think, except for this time, they started to try to change one or two emails, which I'm going to get to in a second. But the thing is, this isn't like a new epiphany that's happened. I've been talking about this stuff, the ways to prevent all this stuff, weapons for preventing some of these attacks and so forth for years. So this isn't new. I already knew that this was a possibility, and like I said, was moving towards creating a second number to use only for 2FA and so on and so forth. That's why this was really a gift when they did this, because I was able to learn a whole lot more through the process. So basically went ahead, these were, now the emails that I had attempted to attack were just communication emails / some personal emails and stuff like that. In other words, they weren't used for any accounts where there was any financial risk of loss or anything like that. All right. It was simply just a communication email, only used for that. That email was not used for anything else. I've already been practicing that, as I preach for years. So that's why, to some degree, I wasn't really that concerned about it. So, even though that was as far as they got there, and, basically went and did some password changes and stuff like that, and handled the situation and made sure to just, spent about 3 hours just changing passwords, changing phone numbers and stuff like that for the email recovery information, right? So I did all that stuff, but it was like, all the other protocols that you would need to follow for, for crypto, cold storage, and so on and so forth. That was already in place. So it was actually a bit of a test, which was good. And so I'd say the test worked pretty well, because, a lot of the carelessness that happens in these stories that we talked about, that's, none of that stuff wasn't an attack vector present, in my sphere, if you will. So that's why, one of the articles I wrote in Why Bitcoin Magazine going back probably 3 or 4 years ago, which they republished multiple times. I think it was called the name of the article is called "The Good, the Bit, and the Ugly," and it's basically talking about all this stuff here. So one thing I came up with is the golden thread principle, which means that emails, if you think about it, are like the golden thread that weaves our entire digital identity together. Everything that we have, every account, every social media, everything that we use digitally online, emails tie it all together. Whether it's one email or multiple emails, it doesn't matter. The emails are what I think say is the common thread, the golden thread. So that's why the number one thing you could take away is to bifurcate your emails. Bifurcate your emails means basically what happens is we collapse and use email for the same thing, which is basically to communicate. So that means when you communicate, that means it's out there bouncing around in the cybersphere, right? So that's how people have been able to attack, because they know what that email is. But we simultaneously use the same email for usernames. Now, not every platform. Some platforms have their own username, but let's just say 2/3 of all platforms, websites, use for the username, they use the email that you sign up for the account for. So you have to separate that. You have to create stealth emails that you only use for usernames, and then other emails that you only use for communications. If you just do that one thing right there, you're going to prevent, and reduce your attack vector by a significant amount. So that's the number one takeaway right there. If there's anything to take away, do that, because if you do that, the thing is you've obfuscated the emails that you use for any of your accounts. Say if it was Coinbase or anything like that, even the AT&T online account or any financial account. If you don't share that with anyone and nobody knows what it is, then there's really, how's the attacker even going to attack that? It's going to be really hard for them to, dig that out of a needle in a haystack if it's basically invisible to the whole world, right? So that's the one thing to do there with emails. And of course,
yeah, that's a really good tip.
For sure.
Yes, I've been saying that for a long time. It's like, I don't know, I'm not sure it quite, always lands with people, or it's one of those things you got to hear multiple times before you implement. But that's what I'm saying. So basically, having already practiced that and having deployed stealth emails for all crypto platforms or anything of, where I see there's a higher degree of risk, there was really almost no way to attack that, because those emails aren't known, they're not shared anywhere. That's why I'm saying, when the battle test came here with this thing, it actually proved to be effective. So, but now it's like, step up your game. So it's like, even if you give yourself a grade of, let's say, 90% or, 93% or 95%, you want to get it close to 100, when we're talking about, we're talking about monetary sovereignty here, right? I mean, 100% responsible for your assets. You really got to step your game up. So that's weapon number one, is bifurcate your emails. Weapon number two is use a password manager, which again is in that same article I'm talking about. So if anybody's not using that, that's a critical thing to use, because not only can you use it for speed, but you can create, generate really long, sophisticated passwords. You can store keyloggers, because you basically, the password manager will auto-populate the username and password fields instead of typing it in, because that's what a keylogger does, is pick up when you type it in. So all kinds of benefits around using the password manager.
What if somebody gets that password somehow? Are you basically screwed?
Well, that's a great point, because the like LastPass, for example, the reason that their name comes, LastPass means the last password you'll ever need. So as long as you have the password for LastPass, all the other stuff's inside of it. You don't even need to remember what it is. But of course, with LastPass, you want to use a two-factor authentication. Like Josh, you were talking about, you got Google Authenticator, which is an app. LastPass also has LastPass Authenticator, which is an app that they've designed just for their own two-factor. So if you have that installed, then that gives you another layer of protection there. But again, the email with LastPass, and I'm saying LastPass, but it could be other password managers, right? That's just one that I like. So when you create your series of stealth emails, you would want to create one of those that you use and only use just for LastPass, right? And that's it. You only use it for that one. It's not a communication email. Nobody knows about it. So if somebody even figured out that you were using LastPass, or let's just say there's top 10 password managers, and they went and tested them all, right? And they started plugging in your email in and trying to do an account recovery. process to try to hack into your stuff. You know,
Wow.
again, if they don't know what your email is, they don't even have a place to start. The reason that most hacks occur is because everybody spreads it. Because the worst case is basically the avatar for the worst case security practices is where a person has one email, they've had it for years and years, and they use the same email for everything, and it's been floating around, and all their accounts and everything is tied to a single email. That's where the highest risk is. So yeah, you would want to use one email for LastPass. You want to create a stealthy password for it, you know, as best you can. But that one you would have, you know, you do have to type that in. But again, you want to use the Authenticator app with it. And then, of course, you know, weapon number 3 is use an encrypted email service, which is one that I like, thanks to Mark Millibit. Actually, he's somebody that you introduced me to, Tatiana, at some point.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I don't know what his last name is. I think he goes by Mark Millibit. So just to give him credit for turning me on to Proton Mail. So that was a project that was like a Indiegogo type of thing from, I don't know if it was actually that platform, but it was like a crowd-sourced project from like 2014. So it's not that old. And it's an encrypted email service. Again, there's others out there, but this is one I like and have deployed. And so the benefits of using this service are the fact that it has jurisdictional power. And what I mean by that is it's based in Switzerland. And of course, we all know that Switzerland has a long history of privacy laws and precedent around, you know, not only privacy, but the, you know, financial regulations and stuff like that. You know, it's friendly in that regard. So if there's, you know, you think about what are the top places in the world that if you know, where something would be located, you know, especially when it comes to privacy and so forth, Switzerland will probably be top on the list, right? So this,
yeah, absolutely. That's why we use Swiss vaults for.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's right. Yeah.
For the Golden Voltoro.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's number one. I can't think of another place that would be in a number one position for those types of things. So, you know, so basically it's based in Switzerland. Now, what does that give you? Well, when I say jurisdictional power, that means that it's not subject to the United States and the European Union, right? As far as where they've got, you know, the subpoena power or those kinds of things to get information. If it's the easier way to think about it is we all know about Google, we know about Apple, we know about Facebook. So as far as, and, you know, especially being in the US, so, you know, if the NSA wants information, you know, they got a backdoor somewhere. They just, you know, they got a bat phone to these guys, I'm sure, right? If they want information, they're going to get it from Google. So if you're using Gmail, this is getting a little bit down in the rabbit hole, but, you know, this has to do with really making sure that, you know, your email doesn't get taken over by what could be the state, because that's another risk factor. So,
yeah, especially if you're living in a country where it's I don't know, where you're not as secure with the states. I guess
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, so just to go back for 1 second, one thing I wanted to start with is let's look at from a 50,000 foot point of view. So if you look at first things first, like where are the enemies? So there's 3 main types of enemies or attackers. So we all know that the first enemy is you yourself, especially when it comes to crypto, right? You are your own worst enemy, because if you make a mistake and you don't follow your security practices, you can screw your stuff up, you know, lose your crypto, that kind of thing. We all know that. So you are your own worst enemy. And then you've got the external enemy, which is really, we think of as when we think of hackers, we typically think of those as, you know, the external enemy is the hackers that we think about in most situations when we think of a hack, right? But the worst enemy is also the third kind, which is the enemy within, which I say is the most dastardly of all. And the enemy within means that you could have someone within your organization who's got a smiling face, you know, just like the song goes, beware of smiling faces and that kind of thing. So you could actually have that, you know. You guys remember the shapeshift story from a couple of years back? That crazy shapeshift story, and they decided to really make it public as it was unfolding.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? That insider job, right? They were getting attacked, and all of a sudden one of the guys, you know, he just left and said, "Oh, I gotta go to the hospital because my mother's ill," right? everybody else on the team is like scrambling and going on full, patrol to try to manage the situation. All of a sudden, this guy disappears. He's like, mysteriously gone all of a sudden. So that was the enemy within. So those are really the places you can get attacked from. Now, the enemy within can show up in a whole bunch of different places, not only within your own organization, but the enemy within could also be somebody within AT&T. I'm just using a carrier example, right? Any of the carriers. I'm talking about, U.S. carriers and so on and so forth, right? I don't know if these guys are in your part of the world, Josh, but so
yeah, well, we've got the equivalent O2 and Vodafone and stuff like that. So
yeah, exactly. So you could have somebody who's working there who is an insider, and think about the guys there's somebody somewhere who's got access to data, right? So if you take a nefarious actor, stick them inside of one of these phone carriers, and they're going on the prowl for some cryptocurrency attacks, then all they got to do is do a data search. They could find your name, they could then know what your phone number is and stuff like that. So that's very, very difficult to thwart an insider attack, the enemy within. So that's why some of these protocols, if you go then pay for your if you go pay for a new account at one of the carriers, your name's tied to the Visa card and so on and so on. If somebody scrapes some data, and they can put stuff together easily and tie it back to you. So that's why you got to step your game up as best you can all the way around, because you got all these possible attack vectors that are lurking constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to go back to the password thing, because LastPass is great. It encrypts end to end, so even LastPass servers don't know your content within the LastPass account, which is really, really important. But I think if someone isn't going to use one of those, then there's another opportunity of what to do here. And this is some advice I gave to some people before even LastPass existed. And that the fact is that many people use the same password all over the place. And this is because it's easy to remember. And humans are very, very bad at remembering different passwords for different areas, and it's very confusing. So what I would recommend, if even at the minimum, is to create an algorithm. And that sounds very complex and weird, but what it basically means is that you create a pattern with a common password. So let's say your password is, I don't know, Josh, Josh123. Terrible password, never use that. But I'm just as an example. And what you would do then is, if you're on Amazon, for instance, you take the algorithm might be, use the first letter of the website you're going to, then put your password, and then the last letter of the website you're in. And this would mean it's a different password for that thing. I know it's definitely not super secure, but it's secure. It's a little bit more secure than having the exact same password on every single site.
Yeah, it sounds like salt. You're adding some salt to it.
Exactly.
Well, is that a good time to talk about our sponsor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk. Let's take a second, because I wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to Salt. Salt is pioneering ways for you to grow your business using your crypto holdings. We've all heard people saying Bitcoin and other digital currencies can't support actual business, but Salt is telling those same people to get real. A crypto-backed cash loan from Salt can turn possibility into reality by covering operating costs or funding expansion. Don't let them tell you what crypto can and can't do for your business. Go to saltlending.com/Tatiana and see for yourself how Salt can help. That's saltlending.com/Tatiana. Sorry, guys. That was like a really funny way to jump in there with that, but it worked.
Yeah, no, and I like Salt. I like these crypto lending platforms, because basically what you do is, instead of selling your crypto, you put it up as collateral, and then you get a loan for that. And that means if the crypto goes up, yay. If the crypto goes down, well, then you'll have to sell your crypto to cover the loan, but you were going to do that anyway to get the money that you needed. So it's better to do it that way. Plus, because it's a loan, depending on which jurisdiction, and maybe Kurt has a different view on this, but it's not looked at as a taxable event because you're getting a loan. You haven't sold your crypto, just got a loan for it. And plus,
yeah, that's what someone else mentioned. That's interesting.
So that's interesting. And if a lot of people have the problem where if they cash out a lot of crypto, the bank just freezes their account, and then you spend 6 months trying to unfreeze it and do due diligence, show you where you got the money from, and all this stuff. Whereas if you get a loan, it's coming from one bank to your bank, so there's no real questions asked. It's just it's a bank transfer from another bank. So it's also a lot less hassle.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Exactly. Yep. Benefits of not having any taxable transactions, and the other types of issues that can happen on the back end. Like you said, I've heard many stories about that. I've heard stories about people actually traveling on a plane to go visit people at the offices of some of the exchanges because they couldn't get some of their crypto or US dollars out of one of the exchanges. So
wow.
Yeah. So
let's go back to what we were talking about.
Yeah. So back to just want to talk about the the three enemies. So if you just go back where we were talking about the encrypted email, so we talked about how if you're in a certain jurisdiction, you've got you can use that to your advantage, right? Now the other thing that you need to look for is in this case, Proton Mail happens to own and operate their own servers. So in a world of AWS and third-party servers, where probably most of the activity that goes on is not on self-owned and operated servers, that's a huge thing right there. So you could have one of these email services say they're located in a country like Switzerland, but perhaps they use a third-party server. Well, that means that third-party server is controlled by an organization back in the US. You're right back to that backdoor thing, backdoor access right there. So I think in this case, they have servers that are in one of the old military bunkers or something like that that's like 1,000 meters down. So it's one of those deals. So you got both of those benefits. So then after you had, I think one of the next best things with Proton Mail, now not that other email services may have this feature, but Proton Mail has it. So if you get like the first level of paid service beyond the free service, if you get that service, you've got like 5 or 10 email aliases that you can use. And what's great about that is it's like creating 10 different emails, yet they all come into the same account as if it was one email. Because otherwise, if you're using like G Suite and you go set up an email, you got to pay like your $5 for each email. Every time you set up an email, it's literally another account.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like that. Okay. So this is one account where you can then create these stealth obfuscation emails to use for, again, you create the one that you actually use to create the Proton Mail account with, you would never, don't use that for anything else ever. So you already masked that because that's a critical email, right? That's the access to the golden thread. So you want to keep the email that you create your Proton Mail account with, only use that as the login email for Proton Mail. And then you create, let's say you create, the next stealth email, you use that only once for LastPass. So basically it's a special single-use username email just for some of these accounts, right? Like the high-risk accounts, that's what you would want to use one email only for that one account, not for communication purposes. So that's what I like is the email alias obfuscation, value proposition you can get out of that. So then that's secret weapon number 4. Secret weapon number 5 is we all know about cold storage, right? So if you want to keep most of your crypto in cold storage, private keys, whether it's stainless steel, titanium, or a paper wallet or what have you like that, or a hardware wallet, where you would still keep the backup seed on a piece of titanium or stainless steel like that. But I think that most people think of cold storage around that concept, which is great because once you get that concept, you can actually just borrow that and apply it in other areas, which means that for example, we talked about the 2-factor authentication apps, Google Authenticator, Authy, and those types of things. So those apps will have often a backup code or a backup key. And you may even have that in some of the emails. They may have a backup code or a backup key like that. In some cases, they actually have a backup code that you can generate codes, store those offline so that if you're traveling or you're in some situation like you don't have access to your computer, they're one-time codes that you can use them once. So if you didn't, like say you didn't have your mobile phone, you lost it, you could go to your safe, let's say, go to your cold storage, pull it out, use the code, get access. So cold storage should be thought of as a broader umbrella than just for like private keys, because you can use it for, like I said, for the 2FA backup codes, anything that has a backup code or a key. Also, like say for your LastPass, your password manager, like your email and the password for LastPass, that should also be put in cold storage. So rather than writing that down, now after you use it for a while, you're going to be familiar with it, but you also should be changing it on a semi-regular basis, whether that's quarterly or whatever. So it's kind of like, you know, and if you have more than one LastPass account, which we do, because that's the only way I know to even how you could even work with clients is by using a tool like that to have access and security at the same time. You know, it's hard to remember all that stuff. So you don't really want to write it down anywhere on your phone. So, and the thing is, you also want to do the same thing with your email. So your main email, let's say, continuing the example for Proton Mail, and the password for Proton Mail, you want to keep that in cold storage as well. Because if you have that inside of LastPass and then you can't get in LastPass, you're caught in a circular reference, in a circular loop, and you can't get to your email because it's in LastPass, and now you can't log into LastPass. You see? Now you're locked out of everything. So, you know, that you have that happen to you once, and then you realize, oh yeah, you need to, you know, basically put some of your critical emails and like your LastPass, your password manager stuff, put that in cold storage. So again, you know, secret weapon number 5, you know, use cold storage as more than for private keys. And then the same way we talk about the golden thread principle for bifurcating emails, that also applies to phone numbers as well. If you really want to take it to another level, so you could bifurcate phone numbers. Now, it's not the only, none of the stuff that we're talking about, by the way, is necessarily the only way to do it. In some cases, there's lots of little ways to do it, and depends on lots of factors, and, you know, cost might be part of it and so forth. So you really have to just make the plan that works best for you, whether it's personal or business. So, you know, like you could actually, you know, so like I said, like the roadmap was to go get another phone number, because, you know, like for the one I've had, it's been bouncing around for a long time. So that was already part of the plan. And so now, you know, we have basically have, you know, 2 phones split with 2 different phone numbers. So one is a 2FA phone number and phone, and the other one is going to be, you know, for communications. But even if you don't have 2 and you don't bifurcate, if you only have 1 phone number, what I would suggest is still going out there, you know, give up your old phone number, because what's at stake is, you know, far greater than you giving up a number that's, you know, everybody has. So for those that don't have this, what you could do is get a brand new phone number, keep that in stealth mode, and don't share that at all. Then you go get a Google Voice number and you obfuscate the number that you have with the carrier, the actual mobile phone number, with like a Google Voice number. So then you share the Google Voice number, right? Then people call in the Google Voice, and then it comes into your phone like that. And that way you're kind of layering it, so you can obfuscate and keep your actual mobile phone number secret, and you can give out your Google Voice number. And that way you could also use that, you know, so basically you get the same effect as having 2 different phone numbers separate like that by using a Google Voice. That's why I'm saying there's more than one way to do it. And then you've also got like Google Fi as another service that is, I think Google acquired this service, but basically what it does, this is only available in the US still, but it's like a roaming service. So they have a relationship with more than one carrier, and your service will just kind of bounce around to whichever is the most effective and the best, you know, signal at the time. And but the thing about, so you get better service, but the thing about Google Fi is that they have 24-hour customer service, but it's like a virtual company, which is great. So the customer service is by chat. Like, I don't even think they have a customer service that you can call on the phone, right? See, let's go back to the hack for a second. So the second attack that happened on a Saturday night, the 26th, when I discovered it at 9:15,
right?
And I could see it was happening at 9:05. Guess when AT&T customer service closed?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. I was like, damn, they were all over that. They started the attack right after customer service closed. So what happens is with these carriers, you know, even when you call the fraud department and you put this on notice, you know, it's not like they are able to lock down the phone. Like, the hacker still has your stuff, and you got to wait until the following business day until the store opens up, and you actually have to physically go to the store and get a new SIM card and take control of your number back. So you actually have a vulnerable period of time when the hacking can continue, and they can continue to unravel your stuff. So, so just for example, the reason Google Fi could be valuable is because they have a 24-hour customer service, even though it appears to only be by chat. So that's what I'm saying. You could go down a rabbit hole in all these kind of different areas, right? We're just literally scratching the surface here. And then finally, secret weapon number 7 is business versus personal. So you can add another layer of obfuscation if you do some of the stuff and you use a business account, like especially with the phones and so forth, or even other accounts as well. But for example, Wyoming, I love Wyoming because they are obviously a crypto-friendly state for, those that know, because they've been coming out more, especially in the past year, right? It's the least populated state in the country, but they are also the inventor of the LLC back in 1977. So they're actually innovators, even though it's a small populated state. Like, you wouldn't think it would be a place that innovation would come from. But anyway, they make forming entities very straightforward and friendly. They don't have corporate tax. They don't have individual tax and stuff like that. But when you create the entity, you're able to do it. It's a privacy-centric or privacy-focused state. So you can actually create an LLC where the owners are not known. Nevada, similar like that, right? So you can actually, you can't tell who the owners are to it. So you can basically create an LLC, which we actually did because we wanted to see, there's no better way to learn than to actually do. So, start a Delaware corporation, start a Wyoming LLC, Wyoming corporation, Nevada, and so forth. And that's how you can really understand, the benefits and the nuances of these things. So we'd actually already created that, knowing that we'd probably put it to use at some point in the future. And of course we did. So basically created a business account with one of the phone carriers, but used one of the new LLCs that'll never be communicated anywhere to anyone. So the same way we talked about that whole thing about not communicating your stealth emails that you use for usernames, it's the same thing you can do with an actual business. You can have a business that you don't communicate. And I'm not saying, and you could create it just for that purpose, but it's also possible you could have a business that you don't communicate anyway. Like you just, you're not communicating it out there in the world. It could be a number of reasons you would do that. It's like you don't need to have it be out there in the world on social media to carry on a particular business. So that way nobody knows what that business name is. So now you've added another layer of, obfuscation, like I said, to being able to thwart some of the social engineering and so forth that could take place at the carrier when the hacker calls in and tries to take over what will be a personal account. If it's a business account, they got to jump through more hoops and stuff like that. And again, they wouldn't know what the business is because, you've hidden it. So, and again, you can do this thing again with and then you got addresses, because when it comes to a business, everybody wants to know what's your phone number, what's your email, what's your physical address, what's your name, and you have another data set that can be spread all over the place. But you can also obscure all that stuff, especially addresses. That's another thing you can obscure, because that's another layer of data that you may be authenticated by with a phone carrier. Hey, what's your address? Like beyond the PIN and things like that, what's your address? So if you've hidden that, again, that's another thing that a hacker can't, come up with because they don't know what it is. So that's a summary of all the golden nuggets there. And again, we could dive into any one of these and spend hours on it, but that's just a high level summary.
Yeah, they're really good points, Kirk. And the big issue really is that the more layers of security you have, the more that you could also stuff up. Like you could lose something or go into a circular problem, like you said, if you have the password for an email in LastPass, but the email is attached to LastPass, so you can't get into either. So you have to sort of keep them separate as well. So it's really important to look at everything that you've just touched on and really almost run through a drill every maybe 3 months, so you stay on top of what's going on. And LastPass actually has a really good function where it gives you a security test, and walks you through if you've got the same password on multiple accounts.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you just brought up there. So like implementing all these different layers, ironically, what you have is you could be simultaneously increasing security and decreasing security at the same time, because like you said, you add all these different things. We just have what's the first on the list for the 3 enemies. Well, that's yourself. So the more you create all these things, the more you have to manage it, which means the more you can make a mistake, or the more you can't get access to something fast enough, or like whatever the case is. I mean, yeah, I had that happen where I think it was about 2 years ago. It was Memorial Day. I was hanging out with my dad and had my iPhone. We were chilling out on a little, what do you call it? Little, I want to say not island, but in the Chesapeake Bay. Right? Pull the boat up, put your chair in, have a beer. There's no better place to be like that, right? So I got up to take a picture. The phone fell out of my hand and went into the water, and that was the end of that. Now, following all these best practices about being fanatical about making sure to grab every piece of information when you set up an account, which includes when I say account, it could be an exchange or anything, their email, their phone number, their address, their everything, the date that you created it, because you never know when you're going to need that stuff. And you think, oh, well, that's all accessible, but what if the website goes down and then you don't have access to it? But anyway, that includes when you set up the 2FA, like I said, you'll be presented with a key so that if you ever lose it, you could, put that key back in and get access again. Well, there was a couple cases where like some of the exchanges like that, I went back and that information wasn't there. And I'm like, where is it? I know that I always save it. That's the protocol. Like, where's the information? But it's possible that actually in some cases, you actually were not presented with it to grab the information in the first place. And it didn't trigger the thought process, oh, why am I not seeing that? I should be I should be saving this piece of information. So anyway, what happened is if you've ever had the experience of having to go back to an exchange, Poloniex or, any of those exchanges really, and you gotta, try to get access again when basically your inquiry is, hey, I'd lost my phone. I don't have my 2FA. I can't get into my account. And they have to go through the song and dance because they want you to come up with transactions and say, okay, well, tell me what your last 3 transactions are or something like that. We need proof of transactions. And you're like, well, that's inside the account or what have you. If you haven't grabbed it, or, even if you have it in a tax software, you still might not have the transaction ID or some kind of proof that they're looking for, right? So you talk about getting caught in a loop. You can trip your own self up with your own security. You can step into your own quicksand. So that was an excellent point.
I definitely think that can easily happen. Something like this also even happened to Lynn Ulbricht. It's like it can happen to anybody. It's happened to so many different people. We got to wrap up, but we're going to leave some detailed show notes with your plan. Where can people find out more information? Because you seem to have a good mastery of this, and you've also been so helpful for me on the tax and crypto side. Have you been making other content that can be used to help people the way that you've done with this?
Yeah, you can always go to thebitcoincpa.com, and I've created actually a link to go for, basically there's the framework for what we're talking about today, but that's going to be, I'm going to build that out because like I said, it can go far and deep. So I'm going to build that out to really provide information to the community just because I'm so passionate about it, and I'm actually obsessed with the finer details of this stuff. So, that and other, the other information there. We actually came up with the epiphany, by the way, now that you asked, the original my intention when I wrote the Ultimate Bitcoin Business Guide book back in 2014, 2015 was to really be the translator between the CPA universe, accountants universe, and the crypto blockchain universe. So that's actually materialized now because now it's turned into, continuing education talks and all kinds of presentations and stuff like that. And I actually wrote the AICPA's Blockchain Fundamentals course last year, and they're the largest trade organization. So I was thinking about because I asked myself, how can I provide more value to everybody in the space? And I was like, oh, you know what? We know about all these different platforms and things because there's a lot of different tax calculation platforms, and there's all kinds of stuff in the accounting and the tax realm of all of it that is not centralized in any one place. So we're going to continue to compile that and actually make like a first of a kind hub as a place to go where people can continue to get information.
Yeah, it can be very hard to know where to get that information, who to trust. It's always sort of evolving, and it's the early days of crypto. I guess we've got to treat it as such and take our own precautions until things get a little easier to manage. Right?
You're exactly right.
So, Kirk, what's your website?
thebitcoincpa.com.
Excellent. So, everybody, go check out thebitcoincpa.com. Check out our show notes. Give our show a like on iTunes. Leave us a review. Follow us on social media. TheTatianaShow.com is our main website. Check out proofoflovecast.com. Proofoflovecast.com is my new relationship podcast. Go to Voltoro.com and check out CryptoMediaHub.com to get your marketing and PR needs met. Thanks again to Salt, and we'll see you next time. Make sure you also check out the event in June, end of June, at Let's Talk Bitcoins with our partner company, Bitcoin Magazine. It's a Bitcoin event at the end of June, so make sure you check that out in San Francisco. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Peace out.
Hey, thank you. Enjoy it.
Guys.
Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.